So you want to be a runner.
Where do you get started?
This is driver's ed for running.
You want to get better?
You want to live longer? This video is going to be your runner's ed complete guide. I'm here with Graham Tuttle. My name is Thomas DeLauer, and we're going to walk you through the various aspects that you need to cover to get on the ground running pain-free as quickly as possible.
They wouldn't let you drive a car until you took driver's ed, got your license, figured out the basics of what stop means, what go means, what the red light means. So this is what we're going to cover throughout these next few videos, right?
So we'll start off talking about how to get your mind right, the mindset piece. And then after that, we'll start talking about pain. We'll talk about what you can do to alleviate some of that pain.
We're going to go over some techniques, some tactics, some just basic anatomy of how your body's functioning so you can get away from the scary diagnoses that are going around pain. Once we do that, we'll cover the shoes. What shoes should you wear? That's probably the most common question I get is what shoes should I wear? And yes, there are differences in shoes. Some are going to be better than others. So we're going to cover that and potentially for different distances, what you want to think about. Then we're going to look at the foundation, right?
Yeah, and foundation, we're talking about not just your physical foundation, like what do you do with your body, but metabolically. Things change. Okay, running should be like walking. So you shouldn't have to do a whole lot to your nutrition. So we're going to cover that. We're going to talk about the foundational piece of what makes you a runner inside and outside.
We'll cover the strength training you want, so whether or not there's specific how you should lift for runners, should they do strength training at all, and then what strength training drills you want to think about in terms of your technique. And then we'll finish up with some more intensive technique stuff in terms of whether you should do sprints, whether sprinters should do conditioning and cardio-based work, bounding, single leg stuff, so you can get a really well-rounded understanding for approaching running.
And then we'll wrap it all up with some bacon. We'll put it all together in this pragmatic approach that you can utilize to get on the ground and running. We want to start with mindset because this is the biggest piece that is stopping people. And some of these things might resonate with you. You don't want to run because it hurts. Probably the biggest barrier, right?
Yeah, pain, yeah, discomfort, physical discomfort.
You feel like you're going to look stupid, like you've never been a runner before. So you see people out there running and it looks effortless and that's not going to be you. So that's stopping you, right?
Or you've never been taught before, you've never been a runner. So it's easy if you've always grown up in sports, if you've been a runner, cross country or track in school, you played soccer, anything that involves a lot of running. But for people who didn't, like maybe you were in band, that's totally fine. But that doesn't mean running is not for you. So we're going to cover a lot of those mental hurdles first, because if it doesn't start here, the transition for who you think you can be, any hard change in life is like that, right? Like if it doesn't start with the change here first, nothing can manifest in your body and your life. So that's the biggest thing. What like when people are coming to you, is that, do you see like a false perception of like what they think they need to be doing first? Like what's the first what's the first step you walk someone through when they're like, how do I get started with this?
Well, I think the first piece is a label, right? Everyone wants to have a label put on them. And from the time that we are very, very young, we have a label, right? And it's, oh, he's the basketball player. Yep. Oh, he's the sprinter. Oh, he's the runner. And then we get this like tribal mentality that is very, very natural in humans, where we're runners and we want to be part of this running group, right? So that's the first thing. We need to break down those labels. It is a very human, simple thing to run. Yep. You do not need to be a runner. You can run.
Exactly. And a big part of this is starting to break apart what the difference between competition is and the art or the form of running. So running in and of itself should feel effortless, just like walking. So people always ask, like, how far could you walk? Like, well, I don't know, as long as I need to, right? Because we don't put constraints, we don't put judgments around it. And not to take away the fact that it is good to challenge yourself and push yourself into discomfort, but the most important thing you can think about is, as a baseline movement form of locomotion, we want to be able to naturally do this. We don't want to be in an ancestral perspective. If I'm so exhausted by the time I get to where I need to go because I had to focus on my form, my breathing, and it was just a challenging thing, and so I get exhausted, by the time I get to the hunt, or I get to the destination, or I get to the water hole, I'm toast. Running needs to be the thing that's just on autopilot we can do in the background. But that never happens if every time you think about running, it's always housed in, I have to hit this pace, I have to hit this distance, I have to burn this many calories, I have to get this many steps. And you see how this sets people up for failure, because they never actually get to feel like, well, what do I feel like when I run? What does it feel like internally without this external judgment? And then they get into a place where they're in pain or they're pushing past what they're capable of doing.
Yeah, and in the next section, we're going to deliberately talk about pain, because when it comes down to mindset, Pain is what is inhibiting you from getting in the mindset. Okay, if you are in pain, that is going to stop you from doing just about everything mentally. That is, you can only prefrontal cortex or willpower your way through so much. So if you can break down that and make it more understandable that running is a subconscious thing, just like going for a walk. And again, we're preconditioned to think that running needs to be brutally difficult. This fixation on fitness, this fixation on getting in shape. If you switch the paradigm, you flip that on its head, and running becomes something that you should naturally be able to do. And I don't say should often, but I really do think that running is something we should be able to naturally do. If we break down those barriers and we get out of pain, and we understand the nutrition, we understand the foundation, and we understand the exercise that you need to do. So now that you're mentally prepped, let's figure out how to get you pain-free. I know what it feels like to hurt. I was 300 pounds before. It didn't exactly feel good to run when I was that weight. But there are a few different kinds of pain. There's the specific, you've been diagnosed with X pain, and then there's the general, I feel inflamed, I hurt kind of everywhere, I can't tell you specifically where, but it makes me not want to do anything. And I'll tell you something, pain and the perception of pain is going to increase the perception of overall fatigue. If you are in pain, then a lot of times you feel fatigued. A lot of times you're not even sleeping well because you are having this subconscious pain that you don't even realize is there because your whole body hurts, right? The first thing we can address with that is just sort of inflammation in the first place. And I will tell you one thing that might motivate you. After today's video, check out LMNT. They are a really awesome electrolyte. Sodium, potassium, magnesium. 1,000 milligrams sodium, 200 milligrams potassium, 60 milligrams magnesium. I just did a 35-mile, 35-pound fasted ruck where I consumed nothing but LMNT electrolytes alongside a couple of really awesome people. I'll tell you, it kept me going. And the simplicity of it is we need those minerals, and they have awesome tastes that make it fun, especially even when you're fasting and you're not eating and all you can consume is electrolytes. So I put a link down below so that you can get your LMNT, but also get a free sample pack whenever you make a purchase. So when you make that purchase, you can get that free sample pack and give that sample pack to some friends that maybe want to try all the different flavors. So that link is down below, drinklmnt.com/Thomas. That's drinklmnt.com/Thomas. Tip, go for the mango chili because it's my favorite. Once you get moving, that reduces inflammation. So sometimes what's stopping you from getting going is actually what you need to just throw aside in the first place and get moving.
One of the things on that point, just like the movement, is you look at the whole body. The heart has this big pump, right? It pushes blood all the way through the body as you get down. They actually call the calf the second pump of the heart. So your heart is this big pump that pushes blood all the way through your body, through your lungs, and it gets oxygen flowing to the actual tissues. And you have your arteries that help kind of push that down. They have this squeezing capacity. But when you get down to the bottom, there's a long way to go from your toes, your feet, your ankles, all the way back up to your heart. And the veins don't have that same squeezing capacity. So they have these valves that stop the backflow, but you get people that have kind of swelling in their feet, so edema, where their feet, their ankles, their legs, they just kind of get swollen, and people will buy compression socks that help with that. But one of the best things you could do is simply just get your feet and ankles, they get them pumping, and simply just pushing this blood back up. Now it helps your body get the lymph and everything moving, and then you get that to your heart, and your heart doesn't have to work against gravity with that, and then all of a sudden your heart's pushing fresh oxygenated blood in addition to this. So there's so much more than just the emotional side. It is a lot of other physiological component of getting your body to get the oil to go through the engine, so to speak.
And from a metabolic standpoint, that just makes sheer sense, right? If you feel stagnant and you feel fatigued and you feel stiff, that's because you're not getting nutrition, you're not getting blood flow, you're not getting oxygen. So it's as simple as that. It can get as complex as you want to get it, but if you get moving, sometimes that's the first step you have to do. And just doing this actually gets you rocking.
So as you start to get the nutrition component down, the metabolic component down, and the movement component down, you start to let the tissues warm up, and that's going to handle a lot of the ick. Now, if you do that in combination with the strength training we'll talk about in the next parts, you're going to start to feel a little more confident, staying within what your body can do. That takes care of the general discomfort you may feel. That gets your momentum. But for people who start to move a little bit more, they may run into some specific pain point problems. So Morton's neuroma, turf toe, hallucis rigidus, metatarsalagia, Lisfranc sprains, Lisfranc fractures, ankle sprains, entrapment, shin splints, calf strains, posterior tibialis tendonitis. You name it. There's a diagnosis for any specific thing going on. Fundamentally, all foot, ankle, lower leg pain comes from the fact that you no longer have movement capacity. Yes, there are specific pain points and diagnoses that relate to give you a search point to work on, but what we really want to focus on is taking away the fear around this. So when you look at your feet, if you don't have the capacity to move them, you end up losing the ability to heal them, because your body is a dynamic structure. And if you don't have the ability to move the tissues, you don't have the ability to heal. So a little question for this is, why don't we get bunions on our thumbs? Or why don't we get hangnails on our nail beds for our thumbs? Well, because we move them. We move our fingers all the time. If you play football and you catch a ball and you stub your finger, you know, it hurts, you shake it off, and it heals pretty quickly, right? That's why the tissue in your mouth will heal. You have so much movement, so much circulation, different types of cells in there as well, but the body cannot be extricated from movement. And so when we look at our feet, most people don't have the ability to flex the toes, to make any basic shape with the foot, to be able to get the toes to engage. They can't feel. And when we don't get these 26 bones, 33 joints, and hundreds of muscles, ligaments, and tendons moving, the body starts to lose that capacity, and we lose circulation, we lose hydration, and it turns into a flipper. And then when we can't move this, the toes don't bend. I've had people that I'll grab their feet and bend the toes and like curl them up underneath, and they will crack. And it's like this kind of crack, like, oh, that hasn't moved in years. So when you look at these pain, what you want to take first is, if I can't move my feet, that's the first thing I have to focus on, right? There will be some component of rest, but fundamentally, when I have the tissue in between all the bones, so you could think about it, you have phalanges, which are the small bones in the actual fingers or the digits, and then you've got these metacarpals in your hand or metatarsals in your feet that run from the knuckle of the toes all the way into the actual base where you got your tarsals down here. These metatarsals have tissue in between them. So you can sit, have a sit down for me. So all the way down your butt. Let me give you one of your feet. So you can start to see some of these things that are going on as you look at the foot. So I've got all the motions and the muscles of the toes. I want to be able to have a bendable, pliable, flexible set of tissues here, because all of this, as I move and engage and relax, sort of get movement here, that relates to the tissue in the calf. So one of the first things you want to start thinking about is, how can I get this foot to engage and get some motion there? So what I want you to do is take your fingers and work them into between your toes, so underneath. This is one of the best exercises you can start with. It's called the foot hand glove. You take your fingers and you just work in between. And it might feel painful at first if you've never done it before.
Yeah, that's different.
Especially if you've been running and you've been wearing shoes, you kind of smash your toes together, then you're going to notice it's a little painful. But starting to work on that is a really valuable piece of this, because you're actually both feeling your toes and you're getting circulation and motion there. So that's valuable. And the next one you can start thinking about is the big toe thumbs up. So if I do this position, it tells you I'm doing good. I have all the use of my fingers and my thumb can move oppositely from the other digits. I want to be able to do that with the toes. So take one hand and then wrap underneath. Oh, you still like crack?
Yes, I got the crack, yeah.
You grab underneath and then you pull the thumb. You pull the toe, which is the big toe is the thumb of the foot, and you can get to this point where you can start to make this position. If I can do this with my body, I have a lot of stuff that's working for me. Wow. So very simple move motions. If you do that to get more space between the toes and get some of these things going, you start to get more circulation there. A simple analogy I always make, so look at, Thomas is great because he's jacked and ripped. So take your hand and move your fingers. You see all of these muscles that are working in his forearm. There's about 26 or 27 muscles in the forearm. They have tendon insertions at the fingers. So if he can't move his fingers, now don't move your fingers and try to get those muscles to fire. They can't, right? So if he can't move his fingers for whatever reason, because he's wearing shoes that either curl the toes up at the bottom, they have a raised heel, or these are fairly flexible, but most shoes that have orthotics or they're stiff, they don't let the foot move. If I did that to his hand and said, okay, your hand, I'll do this one. Now move the muscle in your forearm.
This would atrophy to nothing.
Exactly. And so then we end up with chronically stiff ankles, chronically tight lower legs and shins. And so the muscles in between this tissue down here loses any type of circulation. It means it doesn't get hydration, it gets stuck. And we all know what happens when things get rusty and stuck. They don't move. And so that means you get stiff ankles. Then because I have stiff ankles, my squats look horrible, my knees start to hurt, it goes up to the back. We talk all kinds of stuff.
Well, let's take it one step further. And then you start thinking about waste removal. You start thinking about metabolites. You start thinking about things that build up. Okay, if you have poor circulation because you're compacted, think about that. You're not able to metabolize well, so then it starts making you feel worse inside from the bottom up. And one of the things that I want to address too is you have a lot of people that are even somewhat novice to intermediate runners that will still, I'm a runner by I guess, virtue of the word runner, but my feet are still relatively weak because I spent so many years, which we'll talk about in a little bit, running in traditional shoes. But the other piece is, I'm gonna stand up for a second. If you just have a flipper of a foot and you're running long distances, think about it. You're not using any foot strength. You're all hip flexor to schlep that foot up, okay? That is not an efficient way to run. And like we talked about in the first phase, running should be pretty easy. And chronically using your hip flexors in mid-range, just overloading, is not going to be easy because it's not going to take long before you start feeling it in your QL, your lower back. So how many of you, when you're running, start feeling hip pain, you start feeling knee pain, or you start feeling low back pain, and that ends up being your limiting factor? We're here to tell you that it probably starts a little bit more down low than you think.
So to wrap all of that up, wrap it up in bacon, as we say, one of the things you can spend a lot of time, and there are going to be specific things you can adjust if you've got a bunion per se, or if you've had ankle sprains, as Thomas has on his left side, or if you've got, let's say, flat feet or the knees collapsing. There are specific things you want to work on, but we'll address those not by running, but with a strength foundation, which we'll come back to. But the big North Star I want you to think about is if you're in pain, whether it's just the general ache and discomfort of not having enough strength and mobility, or you have a specific pain point, the solution to that is movement. The solution is not get in a stiff orthotic that prevents your foot from moving, get in a fancy new shoe or a pronation control shoe. Those may help with symptoms, but they will never get the foundation you need to get past that and to get to the point where you actually can run. So that is the big thing. If you have pain, we can talk about more resources, and there's a lot you can go through that. But the answer is movement. Don't forget the hand-foot glove and the big toe thumbs up to get started, and you'll be amazed at how much better you feel. Then you can work on the strength training, which we'll cover in the next few videos.
Let's talk about shoes next.
You can hear the ocean.
The biggest and most common question that is asked before people start running: what shoe should I get? You go to a shoe store, they maybe put you on a treadmill, they analyze your feet a little bit, and they just throw you out the door with some big, cushy, comfy shoe.
So we're going to talk about what differentiates something like these, which are fairly common, to something like these, which are going to be probably more functional. So from the big overall picture, there are 4 qualities of a good shoe. You want one that's flat, meaning the heel and toe are at the same level. It's flexible, meaning it can bend. You want it to be wide so that the toes can spread out, and you want it to be thinner, but that's the least important. We'll come back to that.
Now, I understand the concern with going to a different kind of shoe. Like, the first thing we think about, because we're in pain, we think about comfort. We want cushion. And I understand that. Again, as someone that was super overweight, the idea of pounding on my own body just sounded terrible. But I'm telling you, those kinds of things aren't as important as you think. Now, what you want to pay attention to is a shoe that has what is called a zero drop, okay? See how it is flat? It is the same level from heel to toe. Now, what that does is that allows you to get more ankle mobility, allows you to get more flexibility throughout the ankle and ultimately throughout the foot.
And it matches the fact that when you're barefoot, your heel and toe are on the same level, right? So this is an important part. So the whole conversation around shoes needs to revolve around a shoe that lets your foot function like a foot, as opposed to a shoe that just looks good or is just comfortable, because there are more dimensions than just comfort. So one of the parts that you want to think about is it needs to be wide in the toe box. And so a great demonstration is you look at the shape of your foot. It has a nice spread and splay, meaning the toes go out at kind of a ray diagonal angle. But most shoes come down so that the pinky toe gets cut off for one simple reason. Well, 2 technically. When you have a raised heel, it pushes your foot forward, so that keeps your foot from sliding forward, also causes hangnails, but it looks better. If you look at something like a 0 or this 5 finger per se, they're not the most aesthetic because of the width of the toe compared to something that looks like a pointed elf shoe. So once you realize that the width of the shoe is really predicated on the aesthetic, you realize, okay, well, that might not be the best thing. Just like the best food might not be the one that looks the best, because they can do all kinds of fancy stuff to manipulate it. So if your toes can't move and spread and wiggle in the shoe, that's an automatic no-go. That's second to being a flat level bottom. You need a shoe that's wide, or else your toes will start to suffocate and get smashed together, and slowly that loses the form, and then you end up with pain.
But what about plantar fasciitis? What about if you're wearing orthotics? Okay, these are big hurdles, right? And you think about flexibility. I want you to imagine something. If you were walking with a walker all the time, you would start losing some of that mobility and flexibility in your hip. A walker is there to be a crutch for people that really need it, not for good, healthy, mobile people. Well, why would you put crutches in your feet or crutches in your shoes, right? So you're robbing yourself of this flexibility that allows you to have the foot strength that is going to impact your kinetic chain all the way up, literally all the way up, even into your shoulders. Shoulder pain, all kinds of stuff, believe it or not, could be a direct result of that kinetic chain. So when you rob yourself of that flexibility by having something that's putting you in a track, putting the bumpers on in the bowling alley, that's not exactly what you want for running.
So part of that, what you want to think about is the flexibility of the shoe matters, and if you have a shoe that's really stiff and won't bend, that's an automatic no-go. So part of this is transitioning away from orthotics and stiff shoes. That will take time and work and strength, so it's not just about changing the shoes. You have to do some work in the underlying tissues. But even though these shoes are flexible, remember, they've got a raised heel that's sliding you forward, and they got narrow toe boxes, so these are not good options. We'll finish with a talk about the last component, which is thinness. So Thomas likes the zeros. I'm a big fan of my Vibram 5 fingers. We're going to talk about some options, either Shamus running sandals. Thinness is the least important of the four, right? If I get someone in a shoe that's flat, wide, and flexible, we're winning. But we want to think about the thinness. The benefit of that is it keeps you lower on the ground. So if I have a raised heel shoe like a Hoka and it's got an inch off the ground, if I step on something and I fall and sprain my ankle, I'm at much higher leverage and much more likely to get hurt. So the thinness allows you to feel the ground. But the obvious question is, but doesn't it hurt to step on hard ground? Yes, it does. After having run for years in different barefoot and minimalist shoe combinations, it does not feel comfortable. Part of that is getting used to some of the discomfort of stimulation, because you've got thousands of nerve endings in your feet that need some stimulation. But part of it is you'll get a little bit thicker calluses to get used to it, but part of it is understanding it's a choice.
You know what else is uncomfortable? Being overweight, being insulin resistant, not being able to run, being sedentary. So pick your discomfort.
So part of this discomfort is learning that your feet are part of how you balance, how you integrate. If you could feel the ground, you're going to have better balance. You're going to be able to respond to different situations. It takes time to build up, and it is a personal preference. But if you can get a thin shoe, such as these options, you're going to be able to feel the ground, and it does give you a little bit more grip and balance and coordination. So these are going to be something that if you do want to get to that point, this will be the last adjustment to make, because it is another level of sensation, but it's very worthwhile.
And there are varying levels that we can talk about. So where should someone start if they maybe need a little bit of cushion? Because when I first ran with these, it hurt. Now, I'll tell you, in the next section, we're going to talk about foundation, and we'll cover all of this from a very simple, pragmatic sense. But if someone wants to close off this video and go shoe shopping, what's the hierarchy?
The best shoe, if you've been wearing a conventional shoe, orthotics you've never thought about before, the single best shoe I could direct you to would be the Ultra Solstice or the Escalante. They're flat, they're wide, they're flexible, but they still have about that ½ inch, quarter inch of padding, or probably ½ inch of padding that gets you off the ground. So it gives you a little cushion if you're trying to change your running form and improve some things. If you just want to walk for everyday activities, those are going to be the best option. But you can think of each of these vectors, the flat, wide, flexible, and thin. If you move one direction in that, you're getting into a positive direction. After you get to the point where you feel confident in a Solstice, like an Ultra Escalante, in that realm where you can move your feet, you're pairing with some strength training, then you can look at something like a minimalist shoe. That's where a Zero or a Vivo Barefoot are going to be great options. There's a lot of other companies as well. Those are going to be things where you're getting flat on the ground, a little more functional, a little bit more bend in it, and you're starting to feel and get some balance and coordination. Then, if you want to continue on this journey, that's when you look at something like a Barefoot Maximalist shoe. These happen to be my favorite. They're my personal ones, the Vibram 5 fingers. They're like a glove for your feet, and you look so cool when you wear them. I mean, they're definitely conversation starters for sure. Or you could go to something like a very minimalist sandal. So these are the other shoes I wear. These are Shamus. They just they're easy to slip on. You can feel the ground. They're good for just, getting around, doing different things. These are going to be things that have different adaptations that maximize your foot's capacity without necessarily sacrificing anything, but only if you really want to get this far, because that takes time. It takes adjustment to get to the point. The last piece to talk about is if you're wearing shoes, let's say Zero, Vivo, or Ultra Escalante, toe socks are the best thing you could do. Part of where you put the toe on and you have to go in between your toes, it's such an introduction, but it teaches your body that your toes are individual digits. And if you don't use them like individual digits, you won't have that coordination. So even if you're just wearing something like an Ultra or you're wearing a conventional shoe, getting toe socks takes with the blisters, the rubbing, I'm sure you had a lot of that. It's a huge benefit. So that would be your 4-step guide to work your way down with the best recommendations I've seen for the people which work for them.
Now let's get to what you've all been waiting for, the foundation. Nutrition, exercise, how do you move? Perfect. The fuel that you put in your body, just like the fuel that you put in a car, will dictate how you perform and how you recover. But we don't need to go crazy granular. We can look at the basics. And one of the most general basic things that I want to get out of the open, because it would be dishonest if I didn't say this, is that losing weight is going to make running easier. And if you do put that cart before the horse, it actually does help you a little bit. But let's get a little bit more nuancy with what could be more running specific.
So when it comes to the nutrition part, this is one that I've been confused about, but the protein thing, because I know when we talk about muscle gain and bodybuilding and let's say just overall performance, like protein is so important, but I don't hear that talked about a lot when it comes to running. Are there recommendations for runners in terms of like how much protein they should get? Like how should they think about that? Like, what does that look like?
No, I think number one priority above all else, don't worry about your fats, don't worry about your carbs for this particular discussion. Protein first, prioritize protein. And that's just the thing is people say, well, I don't want to look like a runner. Those runners, they don't have a lot of muscle or they're skinny fat. Well, that's unfortunately because a lot of the runners are not taking in enough protein. It is that simple. And I know it sounds basic, but we go to the gym, we break down muscles when we're resistance training, right? We break down tissue and we repair it with protein. We know we need protein. But when you're running, it is a heavy eccentric contraction, which means that loading that you're putting on your quads for braking, okay, you're always kind of braking a little bit, that is really putting on the brakes and breaking down that tissue in the quadricep, which is a huge muscle. That's just one small component of this. So you need to be able to replace that protein with something. You have a high degree of what's called muscle protein breakdown that you need to counter with muscle protein synthesis. So my general rule of thumb is going to be about 0.6 to 0.8 grams of protein per pound of body weight. And that's a good place to start.
The other thing, so I ran track and cross country growing up, and one of the things before we had any meet is funny because it's just a 5K, but we'd always go carb load the night before. Like how do you find the balance? Because I know that there's some people who do a lot of fat, but I guess to cover carbs first, like, do you need to carb load before you run? Like, how do you think about that or recommend that?
Yeah, generally speaking, unless you're an elite athlete, there's no need to carb load unless you're doing something that's extraordinarily different from what you normally do. Most of us, the reason you would carb load is to restore what's called muscle glycogen, the carbohydrates that are stored in your muscles. Most of us, in a normal sense, are walking around with our glycogen stores fully topped off. We don't need to be adding more to that. All we are doing by adding more to that is overfilling and actually creating demand on the body. Let's forget the whole idea behind storing fat. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but you're creating additional metabolic demand, which is actually going to hinder your performance. Now, the only way that gets nuancy is if you're an elite athlete and you're doing glycogen depletion training and then replenishing in a specific sense. So no, I would say for all intents and purposes, someone that's just trying to get off the couch and get running and get moving, by adding extra carbohydrates into the mix, you're probably just adding extra calories, which is increasing inflammatory response and probably making you feel less comfortable.
Okay. So on the other side of that, I know some of the, like Zach Bitter and some of these top athletes now are doing like fat adapted running, or I guess they're not eating a lot of carbs, just eating a lot of fat. Like, does that change things? Like, is there, I mean, how much is like the energy, like the speed at which the tempo, or is it just how much fat versus carbs you're eating? Like, how do you kind of, like, if I always carb load, but do I eat fat? Like, how do you sort that?
Well, you have to break running down into the 5 sort of cardio zones there. We got zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, zone 4, zone 5. Zone 1 is like you're just going for a walk. Zone 2 is you're maybe a slight jog. Zone 3, I would start to be losing breath when I'm having a conversation with you. Zone 4 is when you're doing some sprinting work for shorter amounts of time. Zone 5 is when you're all out maximum intensity. Okay, we have to understand that fats fuel us through zones 1 and 2 and a little bit of zone 3. Okay, carbs start to fuel us through zones 3, upper high end of 3 and 4 and 5, right? It doesn't mean that you don't use carbs during 1 and 2, but you're predominantly using fats. So yes, a lot of elite athletes that are working in that zone 1, 2, and early 3 range, they like to be fat adapted, which is where they've gone closer to a ketogenic sense, limiting carbs. For someone that's getting started with running, that might not be the best approach because you're limiting sort of the mTOR response that would allow you to repair muscle tissue that's going to break down. What I would suggest people do is pick one or the other, okay? So if you like carbohydrates and you feel like you perform well on carbohydrates, you can consume the carbohydrates, but I would recommend reducing the fats if you go that route. On the contrary, if you're someone that feels better eating lower carbs, lower grains, which might just be a matter of personal preference, What you don't want to do is be constantly mixing these fuels, okay? There is some evidence that suggests there's something called metabolic gridlock or mitochondrial gridlock, where we don't have enough transporters to bring in both fuel at once in an optimal fashion. Sure, it happens. But what I mean by that is if you train your body to be a carb burner, that's fine, but go that route. If you train your body to be a fat burner, that's fine too, but go that route and stay in that lane. I find that people have success where they find something that works for them and they stick to it and they stop trying to say, I'm gonna eat a high fat diet and then carb load before this run or something like that.
So what about, because I know every marathon you see people like the gels and hydrate, like all this, like the gels and energy bars, and it's like the sugary stuff, like it seems to, you know, like drinking Mountain Dew in the middle of a run, like that kind of seems counterintuitive. But like, how do you, like all the supplements and stuff like that, like is there anything?
Yeah, I think again, when you're talking about like at a very entry level, like runner's education, I think that's overkill. I think people, you're probably not at a position where you need to be taking that in. At an elite level, that makes sense because you have drained all of your glycogen stores. And if you're a carb burner and your body preferentially likes to run on carbs because that's how you've trained it, then you're going to need additional fuel. You only have a couple hours on hand of carbohydrate storage. So once you start exceeding that couple hour mark, you do have to replenish. But like you mentioned, if someone is fat adapted, you have way more than a couple hours worth of fat on hand in your body. Even me at about 6% body fat, I probably have enough fat to last me for like 48 hours of running, right? Before I would really start to bonk. So my point here is that you can get by without supplementing additional carbohydrate fuels and supplements. You don't really need to bring that in. I think people overthink it and ultimately end up adding in too many extra calories.
So then what about, I guess maybe the last big question is like hydration and water and like electrolytes and anything like that, sports drinks, like how do you square that, all that stuff?
I mean, first off, you talk about the boring thing. I mean, especially when you're non-conditioned and you're getting used to running, you deplete your minerals really fast. And interestingly enough,
you sweat more?
You're sweating more, but also just the metabolic and just mineral demand, because sodium is the electrical charge, right? Sodium and potassium are opposing each other and they are changing what's called the intracellular and extracellular like gradients and creating a proton gradient. So as we run, we deplete our sodium very fast. And interestingly enough, like we're in a cold environment up in Tahoe right now, when it's cold out, your body has to upregulate different processes just to keep warm, and you actually end up being more dehydrated. So yeah, I definitely recommend bringing in, additional sodium if you start doing it. Like, I like the LMNT packets because they're like 1,000 milligrams sodium, 200 milligrams potassium, 60 milligrams magnesium. It's like a perfect combination. Put a link down below if you guys want to check those out. But definitely something you're also going to find mentally. When you're depleted in those electrolytes, you don't have that spark. And that's just because that's literally your electrical current. So I usually say, like, before you reach for like a goo pack or one of those 30-gram carbohydrate shots, try taking in a little salt first, because a lot of times that quickly fixes that fatigue, because that's the issue, not the sugar.
How much water would you recommend someone getting? So I guess there's a difference, like if they're sweating a lot in a hot, humid climate or like a dry climate or versus cold. Like are there differences, like the humidity versus dryness versus the heat and temperature, like they're sweating a lot versus not?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to make it really, really basic. I mean, you want to hydrate until your urine is pale yellow. Okay. I mean, that's a simple way to put it.
And clear is too hydrated?
I think clear is too hydrated. I don't think we need to be totally clear.
Okay, so if I summarize, it sounds like the first and foremost thing you need to have as running is make sure your body composition, your overall weight is healthy and manageable, because if you're overweight, it's just adding extra load to the body. Optimize your protein to make sure your muscle synthesis is good. Choose carbs or fats to optimize whatever kind of fits personal preference or what you feel best in. And if you're doing that, kind of stick with that predominantly. Make sure you're getting enough water, add in some salt and sodium and potential electrolyte mix before you jump to the energy, caffeine, goo, stuff like that. And just understand that that's just the gas for the fuel. Then you have to go out and run. Is that pretty accurate?
Yep, that's
it.
Good.
So now that we've covered the boring nutrition stuff, that is, it's all essential. We're going to cover the strength foundation. Should runners weight lift? Should you be in a gym? What does that stuff look like? So. How strong you need to be, the physical foundation of your body. And so we're going to cover a few things like whether or not runners should weight train, whether or not a runner belongs in the gym, some of the common misconceptions you have about potentially training in terms of like bodybuilding versus like functional training. And then we're going to talk about some exercises you can do for your feet, ankles, and lower legs to get everything pulled together. So let's start off. As a runner, how important is it to get in the gym? Very, very important.
for two different reasons. Obviously, much more of the functional kind of dynamic side from like actual biomechanics side, which you'll touch on more. But as far as like being able to protect yourself from metabolic dysfunction and insulin resistance, things like that as you get older. If you run, think about it. You are probably going to break down some muscle mass, but don't let that scare you, because all you have to do to avoid that is just have stimulus. So you might think, I'm a runner, do I even need to train my upper body? Training your upper body is still going to provide the stimulus to maintain the muscle, which is going to give you the advantage of better glucose response, less metabolic issues going on later on in life. So yes, it's very important.
But not all strength training is the same. So there are two big risk indicators for falling, which is single leg strength and foot speed, meaning if I trip, I want to be able to catch myself. So if I step and I roll an ankle and I can't catch myself, I can take what would be a little minor bruise and prevent turning into a major fall. Because as a runner, the single biggest injury risk you have is a fall, like acute injury risk other than overuse. So not all training is the same. So just because you're getting in the gym doesn't mean you need to just jump on the leg press or go do a fitness class. You want to think about training like an athlete. That means training functionally so that your body works together as an integrated unit. Now, a few simple things you could do without having to be a personal trainer yourself are understand that if you start training your body one leg at a time, so unilateral training, meaning instead of just doing a squat with both legs moving at the same time, I can do single leg work. So single leg balances, split squats, steps, lateral movement, all of these things train one side at a time. And the benefit of that is you're working on the asymmetries, meaning if my left side is bigger than my right, I want to train one side at a time so that I know if I'm doing this. So for example, a lot of people will squat and they'll squat like this or not even realize it, or they'll rotate. And they may not notice it because you don't think about it, especially if you don't have a mirror. But if I'm doing a single leg step or a split squat or a lateral lunge or a single leg RDL, I get a pretty clear thing, pretty clear awareness of, am I actually balanced? Am I centered? So the single thing, if you take nothing else, when you go to the gym, step away from some of the machines and give these single leg movements a shot. So generally what you want to think about are what are the, have you seen what are the single biggest joints you want to think about, like teaching someone to move in regards to the pain points that people will experience?
Yeah, I'd say ankles, knees, hips, low back.
Yeah, so those things give you an inroads to start to break down how the body would work. So first and foremost, I like to think about the feet are the foundation of the body. They are what are going to integrate and get you to balance. So you can see here, he's on 2 feet, doesn't have to use much, but if he shifts to 1 foot, so he stands on his right foot, all of a sudden, all of these ligaments and tendons in the top of his foot are engaged, his toes are having to work, his lower leg is gripping, he's having to start to balance. So if he does a single leg RDL where he's hinging at the hip and lowering down, he has to start to move this. And so all of that feeds up the chain. So when he engages and grabs with 1 foot, bonus points if you're barefoot, then you're integrating all of this. So starting and looking at the feet, there's a few things that matter. So just being able to get some circulation to the feet. It's more than just doing calf raises, because most people for their lower leg, they think, oh, if I just do some calf raises, that's all I need to do. Well, there's muscles on the front of your shins, so doing tibialis raises, pulling your foot up, they're doing different types of walks, so toes turn in, toes turn out, on the outside of your front toes, on the inside of your front toes. Those are different pieces. You can sort of break down this whole complex into different components. Simply having walks and being on your toes is going to be a great place to start. Having some form of a warm-up is going to be essential, but that's going to integrate this whole unit. You also don't want to forget that your toes can move like your fingers. So you can start to do foot crunches. You can do individual lifts for your toes, taps, stretches for your toes. Going through a set of movements, you're going to be essential to get blood flow to that point. Right? So just before you put your shoes on and jump into this hard work, you're going to do 10, 20, 30,000 steps, make sure your feet are turned on. And then we can move up to the knee. So the knee primarily flexes and extends. With this, you have the ability to rotate slightly, but there's not a lot going there. So you can get all the way to a full flexion, and you get to a full extension, start to train some of these muscles. What you want to think about with this is it's going to be limited in terms of your strength and your baseline, so you don't have to get to a full extension if you're not ready for that yet. You can simply stop at a partial degree and hold. Adding in isometrics, holding on to some of the balance, you get strength through some of these positions with integrated feet is going to get this turned on. Now, we're covering a very broad topic here, so don't expect that, like, you're not going to walk out of this knowing exactly what exercises to do. There's going to be guides and criteria to what are going to be better exercises than others. But generally thinking, you want to understand your knees, your feet, your hips all need attention.
And what I want to add is there's something that's really cool called newbie gains. You've probably heard of this before, right? When you first start training, you get these quick results. And a lot of that is a neurological adaptation. Well, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that you probably haven't done any specific lower leg or foot work before. So you're probably thinking like, this is discouraging because it's going to take me months, years to strengthen my feet. When you start doing strength work for your lower leg and for your feet, you will notice improvements in strength almost the first time you do it because of the neural adaptation. That neural adaptation is all you need to start firing your feet properly so that you can run more effectively. So don't get discouraged. Like, you could start right now and it would probably improve your running tomorrow. It's that quick. And one other thing we want to be aware of is working a muscle through the entire end range. Okay, if you go into a gym and you, let's say for example, do some bicep curls, you are working through a mid-range, right? But we need to have strength at the end range of a movement because that's going to support you when your muscle is at its weakest, okay? So when you are running, you might find, oh, I don't have the flexibility to really like get my leg back, or my hip flexors aren't loose enough, or things like that. Well, you can't just static stretch. Stretching to get loose is like stretching rubber band. It's just going to come right back. You have to stretch under load. So I recommend every once in a while when you're doing your kind of stretches, turn them into just end range resistance training movements. So if you're squatting, reduce your weight. You don't need to be the strongest person in the gym, but what you do need to do is work that full load under full range of motion, which is going to add you a layer of protection through your running.
A helpful way to think about this is that you've got portions of the movement. So we can look at a squat or a bicep curl, for example. There's going to be portions where you're stronger than where you're weaker. So you just want to change the load to be appropriate to that. So if I'm going to work on the strength and the overload, and this is a little bit more advanced, definitely something you want to do some more research or work with a professional on. When I'm trying to be strong, I want to load heavily in the portions where I have the most muscle and joint biomechanical advantage. But when I want to work through a full range of motion, or I'm trying to get all the way through the capacity of what my joints can do, I'm going to lighten that load. So this idea of loaded stretches is the idea of I'm getting to an in range of motion under load that is appropriate so that I can feel the body move. It's pretty intuitive. When you get to a full stretched out lengthened position, you're not going to feel as safe and confident. So you start very light, maybe even just your body weight, and you build up from there.
Okay, so then right before I get out on a run, knowing that neural firing is important, how can I start to like kind of fire the right muscles so that when I'm running, I'm putting the load in the right place? Like, what can I do to loosen up the hips and feel good?
So one of the best things you can do for the hips is lay on the ground. So we can sit down and lay, because you're working with gravity. If I'm standing up, gravity's pushing down, so I'm not getting good activation of these. So what you want to think about is getting the hips to function a little bit. So bend your knees, put your feet on the ground. Most people are familiar with a hip bridge, for example, right? So you raise your hips up, you squeeze the glutes, you're holding this position. But what you see actually, and Thomas is doing a good example of this, they lift the toes off the ground.
Yep.
But I want the feet to be on the ground. I want my toes to be into the ground. And I actually like the opposite side of lifting the heels off the ground. So pressing the toes in, and you can even play around with things like lifting up, like make sure you press into the balls of the feet, so the knuckles of the feet, and lift the big toe off the ground. So you're shifting slightly out, the big toe on the first knuckle, and then you're gonna start to feel all kinds of muscle activation, glute activation. So now pick one leg off the ground, and then sit down and switch. This kind of asymmetrical movement, you're working back and forth, you're marching left and right, you're playing around, do 5 on each side. On the outside, so the pinky toe and the ball of the foot are in contact with the ground, that's gonna force different parts of the foot, lower leg and ankle to turn on. Now switch over, so the big toe and that first knuckle are on the ground, these are the first metatarsal, and then the same marching. The marching switches it up so he can't just shift back and forth. We wanna make sure we're finding the muscles that aren't firing and we're turning those on. So this marching back and forth on the inside of the foot. And so then that is a great way to get the glutes and the back of the body turned on. Then he'll sit up. We want to think about the hip flexors, the muscles in the front of the body. So bend one knee, put the foot, you can put the heel right about where the knee is on the other side, reach forward, hug that knee with both arms. And the further forward you can lean, the more upright you can sit, the shorter you're going to get this hip to torso angle. So what I want you to think about is this other leg stays straight, the foot turns up, and you're going to lift it up. Flex this quad, and now lower it back down. You're going to notice a lot of muscle engagement here. Keeping this toe pressed into the ground, leaning forward. The further forward you can lean, the better. Now this is, now I'll show the other side so we can see asymmetrical differences. You're flexing this quad hard, and what you're doing is working on this two things: the hip flexor, so the muscles that pick the hip up, and also the quadriceps, so this muscle that's in the short range of position, which we're in most when we're running. Back and forth on this, about 20, 30 reps, you'd be amazed at how much this muscle turns on. You probably feel a little bit of a burn here.
For sure. Yeah.
So that's two parts. There's a third part to the hips as well, which is the inside and outside. So we're thinking when I run, I step up and I pull back, so I flex and extend. But there's also some lateral components. A lot of this is a rotational thing. So one of the things we can start to think about is if I balance, I want to rotate my entire leg. So this is a little bit more ingrained detail, but if you think about putting your foot down on the ground, so start putting your foot down on the ground and get this big toe, the knuckle, the ball of the foot and the big toe down, and think about rotating the knee out. So that big toe and the knuckle stays down, the knee rotates out. You're gonna feel a little bit of glute engagement. One of the biggest problems runners have is that they get into halfway through the run and their glutes start to get tight or their hip flexors start to hurt, the low back blows up. Generally that's because their glutes aren't functioning well. And so what we wanna do, because the glutes rotate the leg out, is start to get some of that training engaged. So you can press down, rotate the knee out, and then use the other leg to balance and just hinge at the hip. Sit into this. So these are, you get balance, you load, you're just rotating the hip, sinking down. What you want to feel is the muscle on the outside. So the glute, this entire posterior outside chain, just to feel a little bit stiff, like you're trying to sit that hip back and stretch, and just you can pulse here. As you get stronger, you can lower down. As you get more coordinated, you can take the other foot off the ground, or you can just keep it there for balance. But just getting about 15 to 20 pulses here. So we're doing the marches on the inside and outside, about 15 reps of each, about 15 to 20 reps of the hip flexor lifts, and about 15 to 20 of these pulses each side. That in combination with one last piece, which is the adductors. Your groins are almost criminally undertrained. So one of the best exercises you can do for this is, they call the adductor side plank. So you go to a side plank, we're all familiar here, but now take the inside, the bottom leg off and bend it so it's like a figure four underneath. Now you're gonna start to feel the muscles
already
on the inside. These are huge because they're part of the internal rotation, they're part of the stabilizer for the knee. And you can't just stretch that. You can't just say, I'm gonna do a butterfly and hope it works out. You gotta get the muscles to turn on. If you do those 5 exercises, hip flexors, marches, single leg hip loading, adductor side plank, you're gonna have activated and turn on all the muscles and you're gonna be golden ready for a run. In addition to getting your feet and ankles moving.
Now let's put our money where our mouth is. What are these drills? What are 3 drills that I need to be doing to improve my running?
The most important thing you can think about is, in addition to the foundation we have, you want to think about speed work and plyometrics as strength training for running. It doesn't matter what distance you do, whether you're an actual sprinter or you're a long distance runner. Speed work and these plyometrics are a time to work on your form, improve your strength, and improve your overall elastic ability, because running should not be this grind thing where I'm slamming my heels on the ground. Running should be a bouncy, light, springy, elastic thing. But if all you've ever done is worn Hokas and kind of heel struck and grinded all the way through your run, that may not be your experience. So the first and foremost thing is we need to set the foundation of running is meant to be done on the forefoot. Now that does not mean toes and it does not mean heels, it means the forefoot. The midfoot, people kind of confused, may have heard midfoot striking. That refers to the arch of the foot, and that's not really something you make contact with, maybe 4% of running strides in a typical run. What's repeatable and dependable is the front of your foot. And what does that mean? Well, how would you jump rope? Well, even baby jumps, yeah. Everybody, wherever you are, you got this feel of like I'm slightly on the front of my feet, I'm light, I'm bouncing, my knees are bent, and I can start to shift back and forth. This is that contact point you want to get in touch with, you want to start to feel. Now, as a comparison, if you try to do it on your heels, show me where that feels controlled. So you see the heels are a braking force. When I make contact, I'm stacking the passive tissue of bone and joint, heel, shin, knee, hip, or femur, hip, back. That's why your back will hurt, because every single time I do that, my whole body shakes. If I look at the horizon and my eyes are shaking, I'm making a lot of contact. So as we understand this, we need to be in this light, bouncy position. But we can't just jump into that, especially if you've been deconditioned or detrained. You want to think, what are some drills I can work on that? So the first one is it's a continuation of a spectrum of continuation. So start off very small, very simple, single leg bounces. So what I want you to think about, hands are relaxed, knees relaxed. You're jumping and you're pushing through the toe. So think about getting to the point where you can extend the ankle. I want to push the foot down to the ground. So you see that there's a strength component involved to actually get the ankle to extend. So you'll notice the difference between that and then when I'm bouncing, I'm getting my foot to point down. Now part of this is a range of motion thing that will happen as you do more movement for your feet, But another part is just understanding you need to do that. So we start off, I'm just working on this. As I get strong enough to do this, you'll notice that the calf is not really lengthening. It's the Achilles tendon is starting to pull like a rubber band to bounce back up. So we want to work, it's not just the foot, ankle, lower leg, it's an entire integrated system of the body. So now we want to think, I want the coordination piece. So take that same exercise, I'm gonna start to get some fluidity, right? So opposite arm, opposite in that leg, driving the knee up. So you start to think, if you need to work on this, and don't feel bad if this is something you're struggling with, this is super common, especially with developing some of the patterns. Then you back off and you say, all right, just simple. All right, opposite arm, opposite knee, swinging together, right here. Right arm, left knee, back and forth. Then all I do is add in the other hand. This is the motion. So don't feel bad if this is something that doesn't come naturally. A lot of times as kids, our development is messed up because we get put in chairs, we're not skipping. Some of the skipping patterns we would normally have done, like skipping through a field of daisies, skipping forward and backwards, that gets messed up. So just practice this, just start thinking about this. Then as you get more confident, you can start to get a little bit more of this bouncing. So all we're doing is going from a single leg bounce, adding in arms and legs, and once you have that down, we're gonna take it in some movement. So start here, start to go and bounce, and I'm just moving, little baby steps. And as I feel more confident, I can start to open up a little bit more range of motion. And as I get really confident, you can start to really cover some ground and start to make this one simple movement of a bounce into a single leg loaded plyometric that gets you strength all the way up the chain. You'll obviously pick where you start, where you feel comfortable, totally fine. But the point is that no matter what distance or where you're starting from, every single runner needs plyometrics. You need some bouncy, rhythmic, repetitive loading on the fascia and tendons to get everything aligned as a integrated unit. Does that make sense?
Makes a ton of sense.
The next movement we want to start thinking about is ankling. And it is exactly what it sounds like. You are just stepping over your ankle. So Thomas will demonstrate. You're going to start there and you're going to literally step over your ankles. On the front of your feet, a little bouncy. Start here. Yeah, right there. And just stepping over the feet. Good. So you are getting in the habit of picking up your feet and your knees. And you're, instead of being back chain dominant where you're slamming the heels and you're here and the foot's always behind you, I want you to think picking the feet up. You're simply going to step. It's little baby steps. All I'm doing is here. And if it helps, you want to start off, just get this bounciness in front. I'm light and easy. Shoulders relaxed, faces relaxed. And now I'm just going to start moving forward, stepping over, step over. It's ankling. Now, the way this scales up is you step higher. You start from here, and then you start picking up a little bit higher. Notice the knees picking up in front, hip flexors are working, the feet are engaged. I'm all in this front chain dominant. I'm engaging, and it's a very active position. So you're gonna shorten your stride up a little bit. The biggest injuries happen when we overstride, stretch out the hamstring. So we're gonna shorten that, land under the center of mass, and just ankle. Now, it's the same idea. You start off very small, very slow. As I get stronger and more confident, I pick up. I start to lean forward a little bit more. And as I get a little bit more confident, I can really start to think about opening up the stride. And you see how this simple spectrum of movement goes from baby steps to now I'm actually fully striding in this circular rhythm, right? Does that make sense?
It makes a ton of sense. And you'll probably notice too, like I noticed, like if you're used to running in regular shoes, then that's going to feel very difficult and you're not going to have much stamina with it. And you can notice that if you were heel striking when you were doing this, this becomes just a largely dominant like quad and hip flexor move with practically no posterior chain activation, which is a recipe for low back pain later on, which is why so many people, when they first start running, start injuring their backs. So start small. You don't need the crazy volume and you don't need to be running crazy long distances either. That's a very important note.
And that's why it's so important to think about this like a form of strength training. If I told you to go jump rope, you have a very clear idea of I'm jumping rope and I'm not, because I can't continue to get away with that. So if I said jump rope, go 30 seconds on and rest 30 seconds. No one worries about that. But if I said running 30 seconds on and rest, people say, well, I need to go distance. I need to get longer. I need to go more and more. We start comparing. That's the mindset piece at the beginning. So just think of this. I'm only going to bounce and do this while I can maintain the form. And when I get fatigued, I rest. You recover and you get stronger. That's the part of this. You get the strength and the technique, because once you cross a threshold of basic strength, everything is like gravy. That's what I really want you to remember is it's going to be awkward and difficult and challenging at first, but when you cross the threshold of getting enough work and time and attention, you will feel like a natural runner. The last drill we're going to think about is getting a little bit more speed into this whole situation in a very safe way. One of the things you want to think about is backwards running. So we can think about, I'm pushing and moving backwards. It's very safe in that I can't hurt myself in a mechanical way other than falling, so don't fall, if I'm going backwards. I'm just starting here, nice and easy. Don't overextend, or you'll fall back. Just starting to push off, and I'm going very simple. I get a little more confident. I start to open up a little bit more, reaching back. And what I'm doing is every step I take, I push and I'm extending. So notice I'm actively extending. Because when we move forward, we have some passive gait mechanics that allow us to just lean forward and catch ourselves. We don't have that when we backpedal. So when we backpedal, it takes 120% of the same amount of effort to run at 80% of the speed, so 80 to 100%. So the point of that is it's harder to run backwards at the same pace than it is to run forwards. So you have to actively use these muscles of extension. And to extend the hip with the glute, extend the knee with the quadricep, extend the ankle with the calves, actively push, push, push. And again, you start off very small, just very nice and easy, bouncing, and then you can extend and really get aggressive with it. So all three of these drills, you can start, whether you're a day one runner or you've been doing it for years and you're dealing with injuries, you need to get that capacity back. So these are things, you start off, you scale to what you can do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And like taking the backwards running, if you want to create more metabolic demand out of it, you're thinking, hey Graham, this is too easy, man. Like I'm in super good shape. Like I don't have time to work out and do this. Good news is you can do that, and all you have to do is simply add a sled and you can start actually adding some resistance to it. I don't recommend you start out with that, but that's the kind of thing that, you know, like Ben Patrick talks about all the time. It's literally the kind of quintessential like bulletproofing, like working in the reverse of a motion is going to make you stronger against injury. So if you're up for it, go ahead and add a sled and add a little extra weight if you're at the gym, and you can kind of do that whole game.
And that's a great example. So all of this stuff is patterns, and that's what I want you to think of. Overlaid on top of this are patterns. And so if you're having trouble getting the arm swing going down, you can start to think of, okay, let me lunge. Let me add more resistance to slow down, because if I'm lightweight, I don't know how to balance it all. Let me just add more resistance, meaning I go further in the movement. Or if I'm having trouble figuring out how to use these muscles of extension, let me add a sled. As you get more confident with that stuff, then you can start to add in the speed and the intensity with that. The last note, because once you've got those down, you're gonna say, well, we're not actually running. This is when you begin with barefoot strides or some minimalist shoe strides on a safe, flat surface. What you wanna think about is you're gonna start off slow and finish slow, meaning you're ramping up and ramping down. Most injuries happen at the acceleration or the deceleration. So what you wanna do is pick a general, like if you're gonna squat or gonna bench press, you'd say, I'm gonna do about 80% for a few reps. I don't just max out every set, which is what people do when they run. They think about it like that. You're gonna just start off with these same ideas, picking the feet up, being bouncy, stepping over the feet, the ankling, picking the knees up, go for a stretch about 40 to 60 yards, ease into it, slow down out of it, and then treat that like a repetition of strength training, walk back, and this is gonna start pulling these things together. As you get more confident, you can add more volume to it, but because you're doing it in small measured amounts, you're gonna be golden, you're gonna do it without getting injured. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Repetitions of running, whether it's 50 yards, 100 yards, and then eventually you're doing repetitions of a half mile, repetitions of a mile. Then you're doing daily repetitions of 10 miles. You see where I'm going with this.
And the only thing that's going to change is the degree, the speed at which you're making contact with the ground and the time on contact. So if I'm running slowly, I may graze the heel after I make contact. If I'm running really fast, I may hit that. But because I have the strength, because Thomas can squat 800 million pounds, he can definitely squat 300 pounds. So that's the idea, is we want to train for a high ceiling so that when I do go out for a run, whether it's a slow pace or long distance, it's easy. You can go for walks forever, right?
Exactly.
So you can do the same thing. So that's what we want to think about, is actively moving and treating this like an art form. Then you can add in the competition or the challenge or the workout. That's the progression.
And the last little thing, since this is a nutrition channel, these little movements may not seem like much, but you're activating tissues and fibers you hadn't ordinarily activated. So you bet your bottom dollar you better be increasing protein when you do this, even though it doesn't feel like conventional strength training. So Graham, where can everyone find you?
Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, at the Barefoot Sprinter. If you have questions, most directly you can get in contact with me with DMs on Instagram. But if you are, let's just say, interested in getting stronger with your feet, want some coaching, want a step-by-step laid out process in the book about that, I have a program with over 2,000 people who have gone through it. At the time, maybe at this point, 100,000 people. I don't know when you're watching this, but it's my love, pride, my love baby, my baby love. What do you, love child? It's my love child. I'd love to help you work there.
Pride and joy. So thanks for doing this, brother. This has been your complete guide to runner's education.